Welcome back, everybody. We're kicking off the new year with a deep dive into the world of Bitcoin. 2024 was a wild ride. I was looking at this report on Bitcoin's performance, and wow, we're talking big price swings, tons of institutional investment, and some really cool developments within the Bitcoin network itself.
Yeah, it really does feel like things are changing faster than ever. It makes you wonder, is Bitcoin moving beyond digital gold and becoming something more?
That's a great question, one we should definitely explore. Let's start with those price swings you mentioned. Early 2024 saw Bitcoin jump from around $40,000 to over $75,000. What drove that initial surge?
Well, the report points to one big factor, the approval of a Bitcoin ETF. This was a huge sign that mainstream institutions were ready to embrace Bitcoin, and the market definitely reacted.
Yeah, it's amazing to think how for years institutional involvement was just a whisper. Now it's like a driving force. And things got even crazier in December, with Bitcoin breaking through its previous all-time high to reach over $100,000.
Right. But it's easy to forget Bitcoin didn't just go straight up. It fluctuated a lot. For a while, it bounced between $50,000 and $70,000. I think this is a good reminder that volatility is still a big part of this market.
Totally. It's not for the faint of heart. But let's get back to those institutional investors. The report really dives into how much money they put into Bitcoin in 2024, especially through those ETFs. The scale of their involvement is mind-blowing.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty staggering. ETFs now hold over 11 million Bitcoin. To put that in perspective, that's a huge chunk of the total supply. It shows just how influential these institutions are becoming.
Yeah, and two names really pop out, BlackRock and Grayscale. They hold most of those ETF Bitcoin holdings, 45% for BlackRock and 19% for Grayscale. Does that much power in the hands of just two companies raise any concerns?
Yeah, it's something to watch for sure. I mean, it's great that institutional money is bringing more stability to Bitcoin, but this much concentration does raise questions about potential risks.
Like, what if one of them makes a sudden move? Could it shake the whole market?
Exactly. We're talking trillions of dollars here. It's a fascinating dynamic to watch. And speaking of big players, we can't talk about institutional investment without mentioning Michael Saylor and his company MicroStrategy.
Right, he's like a Bitcoin evangelist.
Totally. The report shows how he kept buying Bitcoin throughout 2024, spending billions. He even issued convertible bonds to get more money to buy even more. He's all in.
He's definitely got conviction. And it looks like he's inspired others to follow suit. Companies like Marathon Digital Holdings, Riot Platforms, Semper Scientific, they've all started building up their own Bitcoin reserves.
It's interesting to see, right? But it makes you wonder, are they doing it because they believe in Bitcoin's potential? Or are they just chasing profits in a hot market?
Yeah, are they true believers or are they just riding the wave?
Yeah.
Only time will tell. But this brings us to another interesting point from the report. New developments within the Bitcoin network itself. We're talking about things like ordinals and runes.
Yeah, this is where things get really exciting. It feels like we're pushing the boundaries of what we thought Bitcoin could do. For a long time, it was seen as just digital gold, but ordinals and runes suggest that Bitcoin is becoming way more versatile.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm not super familiar with ordinals and runes. Could you break it down for our listeners who might be the same boat?
Sure. Imagine creating NFTs directly on the Bitcoin blockchain. That's what ordinals allow. It basically opens up a whole new world of possibilities for Bitcoin beyond just being a currency.
So it's like bringing the NFT revolution to Bitcoin. That's wild. Okay, so what about runes? What are they all about?
Think of runes as bringing fungible tokens to Bitcoin, kind of like ERC20 tokens on Ethereum. Basically, we can now have things like stable coins, governance tokens, or even in-game currencies all built on Bitcoin.
So with runes, you can build more complex applications on Bitcoin. It's like it's learning new tricks.
That's a good way to put it. With ordinals and runes, Bitcoin is becoming more programmable. And that opens up a lot of exciting doors.
This is where my brain starts to fry a little bit. Can you give some real-world examples of what this means for the average Bitcoin user?
Sure, one example is Bitcoin staking. With staking, you can put your Bitcoin to work, help secure the network, and earn rewards at the same time. And it's been gaining traction fast.
I read about a protocol called Babylon. Is that what's driving this staking trend?
Exactly. Babylon launched last year, and it's been making waves. It's cool because it lets you stake your Bitcoin without moving it off the main Bitcoin blockchain. So you earn rewards while keeping your Bitcoin safe and secure.
The best of both worlds. The report mentioned that Babylon's first staking round was a huge success. They staked 1,000 Bitcoin in just 6 blocks. Does this mean staking is here to stay?
It definitely seems that way. People are really interested in this kind of functionality. But before we get too carried away, let's zoom out a bit. We've covered a lot. Crazy price swings, institutions pouring money in, and new features like ordinals, runes, and staking. It's like Bitcoin is transforming into something completely new.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. So where does this leave us? What does all this mean for the average person who's interested in Bitcoin? What should they be paying attention to moving forward?
Those are great questions. And that leads us perfectly to the next part of our deep dive. When we come back, we'll look at the report's predictions for 2025 and explore what the future might hold for this revolutionary technology.
Okay, we're back, ready to dig into the second half of this report. We've seen Bitcoin go through a lot in 2024, prices going wild, institutions piling in, and those new features that kind of blew my mind. But looking ahead to 2025, what does it all mean?
Well, the report's pretty optimistic. It acknowledges that the crypto market can be unpredictable, but it also highlights a bunch of things that could push Bitcoin even higher. I think the question isn't if Bitcoin will keep evolving, but how.
So let's talk about those predictions. What trends does the report see shaping Bitcoin in 2025?
One big one is that institutional money will keep flowing in. It predicts that ETFs will become even more important, maybe even the main driver of Bitcoin's price.
So those Wall Street giants are going to keep buying up Bitcoin. But doesn't that mean even more power for institutions like BlackRock and Grayscale? We talked about the risks of that earlier.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. The report does mention that. But it also says that more institutions getting involved could actually make prices less volatile. See, right now, a lot of the big price swings come from leverage trading on centralized exchanges. But if more people are buying Bitcoin through ETFs, that's more like traditional investing. It's usually less risky, less speculative.
So Bitcoin's price might become more stable. That would definitely make it more appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
What about those new network developments, ordinals, runes, staking? Do those play a big role in the report's predictions for 2025?
They do, but the report's also realistic about it. It says these innovations could be huge, but it's still early days. We need to see how much people actually use them.
Right, so it's kind of a wait-and-see approach. Will these new features actually become essential for Bitcoin users? Or will they just fizzle out like some other hyped-up trends?
Exactly. Technology moves fast, but it takes time for people to catch up. And even with all these new features, Bitcoin still has some limitations compared to platforms like Ethereum, especially when it comes to speed and transaction fees.
Right, so even if these features are cool, they need to actually be useful and affordable for people to use them. Kind of like a new restaurant with a fancy menu. The food can look great, but it needs to taste good and be affordable for people to keep coming back.
Speaking of affordability, what about the regulatory landscape? We talked about the new U.S. administration being pro-Bitcoin. Does the report think that'll have a big impact on Bitcoin in 2025?
The report sees it as a good thing, but it also says not to get too excited just yet. Politicians make promises, but those don't always turn into action. The administration's plans to create a Bitcoin reserve and stop a CBDC are definitely positive signs, but we have to see if they actually follow through. Actions speak louder than words, right? We'll have to see if those promises turn into real policies that help Bitcoin. So overall, it sounds like the report is cautiously optimistic about Bitcoin in 2025. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think so. The report recognizes both the opportunities and the challenges. It points to the growing institutional interest, the exciting new developments, and the supportive regulatory environment as positives. But it also says not to expect mass adoption overnight. Bitcoin still needs to keep innovating and overcoming its technical limitations.
It's a balance between hope and realism. Right. It's a bright future, but it's not going to be a straight line to the top. Speaking of those new features, I want to go back to ordinals and runes for a second. I get what they are, but I'm still having trouble picturing how they would actually be used. Can you give some more concrete examples?
Sure. Remember, ordinals let you put unique digital assets directly onto the Bitcoin blockchain. So think about things like digital art, collectibles, even virtual real estate, all secured by Bitcoin. Imagine owning a piece of digital art that's verifiably unique and can't be copied thanks to the blockchain. That's what ordinals make possible.
Okay, so it's like owning the original Mona Lisa, but in the digital world. That makes sense. What about runes? Where do they fit in?
Think of runes as the tools to build more complex stuff on Bitcoin. They let you create those fungible tokens, which can represent anything. Stablecoins, governance tokens, in-game currency. So suddenly, Bitcoin can do a lot of the things we associate with decentralized finance or DeFi.
So you're saying we can see decentralized exchanges, lending platforms, prediction markets, all running on Bitcoin. It's like a whole new financial system built on Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's the idea that a lot of developers are working towards. But it's still super early. The tech is there, but it needs to be refined. And more importantly, people need to actually want to use it. We need to see real-world applications that solve real problems.
It's like the early days of the internet, right? We had the technology, but it took time for people to figure out what to do with it. Then came Amazon, Google, Facebook, and the whole digital world as we know it. Could ordinals and runes be the spark for something similar on Bitcoin?
Maybe. But we have to be realistic. The Bitcoin blockchain, with its focus on security and decentralization, isn't the best at handling tons of transactions. It can be slow and expensive. So developers need to find ways to make these applications work well and be user-friendly.
So it's a trade-off. Bitcoin is super secure and reliable, but it's not the fastest or cheapest. And that can make it hard to build complex applications.
Exactly. It's a challenge developers need to figure out. But let's not forget about staking. We talked about Babylon, but the report also talks about the bigger picture of what staking means for Bitcoin.
Right. Staking lets people actually participate in securing the Bitcoin network and earn rewards for it. It seems like a good thing for everyone. But the report also mentioned a potential downside to staking, right?
Yeah, it all comes down to centralization. If a small group ends up controlling most of the staked Bitcoin, they could have too much power over the network. So the Bitcoin community needs to be careful about that as staking becomes more popular.
It's a balancing act, right? You want to encourage participation, but you don't want too much power in the hands of a few. That seems to be a recurring theme in all of this, finding the balance between innovation, adoption, and the core principles that make Bitcoin so unique. Before we wrap up this section, there's one more thing from the report I want to touch on. BitVM.
Ah, yes. Bitcoin virtual machine. This is where things get really interesting, even futuristic. It's about bringing more advanced smart contract capabilities to Bitcoin.
Smart contracts on Bitcoin. I thought that was more of an Ethereum thing.
It has been, yeah. But BitVM is trying to bring that functionality to Bitcoin, but in a way that prioritizes security and decentralization. It's tricky because you want more functionality without making the Bitcoin network less secure.
So it's like trying to put a supercharged engine in a classic car without messing up its vintage style. Sounds complicated.
It is, and it's still being developed. But the report says they've made a lot of progress. The total value locked in programmable Bitcoin layers, including BitVM, went up 20% in the third quarter of last year, so people are taking it seriously.
That's encouraging. Can you give an idea of what kind of applications BitVM could enable in the future? What problems could it solve that we can't solve right now?
Imagine decentralized exchanges, lending platforms, prediction markets, all running on Bitcoin, even things we haven't thought of yet. That's the potential of BitVM.
So it could be a whole new level of innovation for Bitcoin. But like you said, it's early days. We got to see if it lives up to the hype.
Exactly. We'll have to see how BitVM develops and if people actually use it. But the fact that people are pushing these boundaries shows how much potential Bitcoin still has.
It's like watching a caterpillar turn into a butterfly. We know it can be something beautiful and amazing, but the process is delicate and unpredictable. All right, we've covered a lot. Bitcoin's crazy year, all the institutional money coming in, ordinals, runes, staking, and now this BitVM thing. But here's the question that keeps coming back to me. What does this all mean for the average person who's interested in Bitcoin? What's the takeaway for them?
That's a great question, and it's the perfect way to transition to the final part of our deep dive. When we come back, we'll shift gears from analyzing the past and predicting the future to talking about what these developments mean for you, the listener. We'll discuss how to navigate this changing landscape, make smart decisions, and maybe even take advantage of the exciting opportunities that are out there.
Okay, so we've gone through Bitcoin's ups and downs in 2024, the flood of institutional money, and those game-changing features like ordinals, runes, and staking. We even looked ahead to BitVM and what it could mean. But now let's bring it all back down to earth. What does this all mean for the average person, for our listeners?
Yeah, that's the important part, right? It's easy to get lost in all the hype and technical stuff, but at the end of the day, it's about how this impacts people.
Exactly. So less crystal ball, more practical advice. What are the big takeaways from this report that people should keep in mind as they navigate the Bitcoin world in 2025 and beyond?
Well, one thing is clear. Bitcoin isn't just for techies and crypto diehards anymore. It's becoming mainstream. Big institutions like BlackRock and Grayscale are major players now.
So the landscape is changing. Individuals need to be more informed than ever, right?
Absolutely. Do your research, understand the tech, be aware of the risks and the rewards, and don't forget diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, no matter how tempting it might seem.
Good advice for any investment for sure. But what about those new features? Ordinals, runes, staking, are those just fancy gadgets, or are they real opportunities for the average person?
They could be huge, but there's a learning curve. For those willing to put in the time, ordinals could open up a whole new world of digital assets and collectibles. Imagine owning a piece of digital art that's truly unique and yours thanks to the blockchain.
It's like owning a piece of history, but in the digital world. And what about runes? How could those impact people?
Runes could change how we interact with financial services. Imagine decentralized lending, prediction markets, all sorts of cool financial tools built on Bitcoin's security. This could give individuals more control over their money, open up new opportunities.
It sounds powerful, but kind of intimidating too. Where do you even start with all this?
Yeah, there's definitely a learning curve, but there are more and more resources to help people understand this stuff. Online communities, educational platforms, even podcasts like ours are breaking down these complex ideas.
Speaking of which, I think we've done a pretty good job of that today. We've gone through a lot of info, explored some tough concepts, and hopefully given our listeners some valuable insights.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the biggest takeaway is that Bitcoin is evolving incredibly fast. It's not just digital money anymore. It's a platform for innovation, a way for people to take control of their finances, a glimpse into a more decentralized future.
It's an exciting time to be involved in Bitcoin, but it's also important to be careful and make informed decisions. Like we talked about, there are risks involved too. Staying informed, doing your research, and never stopping learning is key.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, Bitcoin is for everyone. It doesn't matter what your background is or how tech-savvy you are. Anyone can participate. So don't let the complexity scare you. Dive in, explore, and see what Bitcoin has to offer.
That's a great way to put it. To all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep learning, keep asking questions. The future of Bitcoin is being shaped right now, and you can be a part of it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Bitcoin.
And until next time, stay curious, stay informed.